Okay, good mornings. Okay, I want to start by paying tribute to Dr. S.B. Mujumdar, Chancellor of Symbiosis International University, Dr. Vindhya, Principal Director, Dr. Rajani Gumte, Vice Chancellor, and Professor Shivali, Director, Symbiosis School of International Studies. Distinguished hosts, delegates, faculty, and students of Symbiosis International University, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you. Allow me to start by joining previous speakers from yesterday. First of all, to congratulate the faculty for laying the International Relations Conference under the theme India and the Indian Ocean, Sustainability, Security, and Development. This could not have been more timely. And this being my very first visit to Pune and to Symbiosis, let me commend the visionary who started this institution in such magnificent surroundings. More so, commend the enduring warmth and hospitality of this community. I will take away the true belief that surely and without a doubt, the world really is one family, because I have tasted and experienced it. Thank you so much for the honor of inviting me to grace this conference as a speaker, and for the facilitation and very kind hospitality since my arrival to your beautiful city. Again, I take cognizance of the kindness with which the organizers have so kindly accommodated me in reorganizing the program to suit my personal circumstances. And so many thanks for the speakers who allowed themselves to be shifted from this to a later slot. Thank you so much. This is going to be a marathon session because, as we have told you, we have to catch time and I have a flight to catch. But of course, you know about the marathon, eh? The marathon is the race that everybody runs, and Kenya takes the medal. So I'm intent on taking the medal today by catching up on that time. Before we get to that, my address seeks to very quickly touch on maritime development and the place of international cooperation in that process from a Kenyan perspective. Other than being a country of the Big Five, the seventh wonder of the world, which is the great wild-beast migration from Mara to Serengeti, or, as I have said, the marathon runners, Kenya also shares a part of the Indian Ocean and is the gateway to a very large hinterland comprising of otherwise land-linked states in Eastern and Central Africa, whose very livelihood depends on the international ports of Mombasa and, to some extent, Lamu on the northern coast, on the northern part of Kenya. Indeed, the Mombasa port has created a huge historical connection between our two countries, and to date hosts a huge diaspora from India that has fully integrated our two communities. But what is the maritime sector? From my experience, and the person who introduced me rightly said, before you develop, you need to understand. You need to have the knowledge. What are you developing? And I'm going to share some of the challenges we have as Kenya. As you have seen, I'm moderating the session where the money is coming together. But before you get that money, as I was sharing with the next speaker, whether we have any projects that they are funding from a coastal perspective in Kenya, and he said no. This is because I think from a development perspective, you need first to understand what it is you are developing in order then you can get the money and the development cooperation to then come and fund and grow the sector. And I want to say that from the Kenyan perspective, for the longest time, the maritime sector was understood as the port industry. You see, the port of Mombasa is always busy. There's always money because from a revenue perspective, gives a big chunk to the exchequer, and therefore we over-concentrated so much on what the infrastructure then meant and we forgot to look at the other areas. So for us, and I remember one of my biggest challenges in my previous job was to be understood, because what was I trying to fix when the port is working? We've got new cranes, we've bought new terminal operations, equipment, we've dredged the channel. What more would she be talking about? And I remember at one point feeling so frustrated because I'm not communicating, I'm not being able to communicate to my colleague that the maritime sector is way beyond. The blue economy will not even begin to start until we understand what it really means. And thanks to international cooperation, we were able to call the international maritime community. The Secretary General of the IMO came, and we had a community like this speaking on a national platform where the president had to come and then to challenge and manage perceptions. And we want to say that from that, then government understood that, yes, it's not just the port. It's a lot of so many other components, so many nodes, speaking together, communicating, and then bringing up a whole sector. And that's how we got the government to appreciate and create a whole new department of shipping and maritime affairs. Because for the longest time, and I'm glad I heard Bangladesh talking like that yesterday, 40 years before they started the road to the blue economy. So this is the first time for us that we've also had a dedicated state department dealing with transport affairs. So from that, therefore, we were able to come up with a maritime sector concept that brings together a wide array of activities ranging from, most important, of course, facilitation of trade through ports and transport corridors, other issues like resource exploitation, fisheries and related activities like the nascent aquaculture and seaweed farming, extractive industries, a lot of prospection going on in our EZ, like offshore mining, recreational and leisure activities, cruise shipping, sports fishing, diving, boating, etc. The management, therefore, of all those put together, which is what forms the blue economy, involves so many primary and secondary stakeholders, so much synergy, effective participation and inclusion in governance, policies, strategies, legal frameworks. These are all that we appreciate now is what is essential to spur growth, not just at national level, but in such huge levels that are needed for wealth and job creation. And this calls for social, economic, and biological systems all being utilized in a sustainable manner so as to ensure and enable generational equity, intergenerational equity. And given this wide array on broad complex nature of the sector, numerous key role players are responsible for different aspects of operations, management, and policy formulation. That's the challenge we've experienced as Kenya government. And these players are at different levels. Government at the national and regional levels, state-owned agencies, which includes the Maritime Administration, National Treasury, Customs, ports, port-related industries, security, standards, bureaus. But of course, not to leave aside the private sector, who are the maritime service providers, that's the insurers, logistics suppliers, cargo associations. It's the business of all these maritime activities, which are generally interconnected, that then yields and brings development into the maritime sector. This is important because a decision in one area will adversely affect the performance of the other sector. And bringing this common understanding to government wasn't a main task. The first challenge then becomes to ensure that the multiplicity of those players in the subsectors do not work as disparate entities, but refer and synchronize their operations with each other. Coordination, sustained effort, so that we exploit the interconnectedness of the industries and also the human activities. And we found that the integrated national maritime policy development was key to this. This is important because it becomes, that is the policy, becomes the basis for national development plans. You'll be surprised that for the longest time in Kenya, even in the development plans, in the reports, economic plans, as long as we touched on the ports, as long as the data was drawn from the ports, government thought it was enough. But now with the INP, that is the Integrated National Maritime Policy, we can base our national development plans on it. We can make reference to it in terms of doing legislation that drives the sector, and also in the facilitation and enablement of the sound management of ocean and sea resources. Of course, that leads to the expected sustainable development. And this is important also, the INP, because it combines the social, economic, technical, and scientific information that helps the related management agencies to understand the trade-offs and also the consequences of any decision they may take, which will be expected to extend beyond their traditional roles and responsibilities. So what are the strategies and the key focus areas? In terms of the INP, we realize that based on mutual understanding, respect, and shared responsibilities, we seek to find joint solutions to common challenges, and of course, address shared maritime concerns, issues, not just for us as a country, but also as a region in terms of the IUU, the maritime security issues that formed part of our discussion yesterday. Most important, regional maritime funding for maritime projects, capacity building in terms of maritime education, training and research, and of course, making sure, and one of the challenges that we brought when we addressed the whole nation was, how do we understand, how do we measure that the hardware we've so much invested in terms of infrastructure is delivering to the optimum, unless we are focusing on these areas. And last year, we had the honor to host the TICAD 6 in in Nairobi. And one of the issues that came out of that, we had a major blue economy side event. And what came out of that is that states in the region and all of them must adopt policies and legislation that ensures that merchant and fishing fleets are properly operated and maintained to ensure the realization of maximum economic benefits, that states must also cooperate in ensuring the effective movement of around 90% of global trade, which is carried on shipping, and most important, that this is the collaboration and cooperation that will ensure increased world commerce, which will then translate from what we expect to benefit from the blue economy, wealth creation, and generally economic development of nations and peoples. So what's the part of international cooperation in all of that? We are aware that sustainable maritime management is an international concern, and this has come out very clearly at this conference. The indicators and strategies to attain these goals are developed at international level by organizations and agencies who have been endowed with the mandate. And here we have the United Nations, the IMO. A very critical component of the IMO is the technical cooperation, so that to ensure that whether developed, middle developed, very highly developed, everybody is reading from the same page. We have the ILO in terms of the human element and the welfare of the seafarers, and also the UNCTAD. And in line with IMO's mandate of ensuring a safe, secure, environmentally sound, efficient, and sustainable shipping through corporations, IMO parties have the obligation to ensure that they put in place measures for regulating human conduct that impacts on the marine environment in order to ensure sustainable development of the maritime sector. And IMO, like most international organizations, is a regulatory agency with no implementation powers or enforcement, and this is thus left to the member states, for which we are all parties. This is achieved in IMO states under the management, oversight, and coordination of maritime administrations, individual states, and on the basis of regional, bilateral, and multilateral cooperation between the states. So this becomes very, very important. Sustainable maritime management indicators are therefore very, very important to ensure the environmental stewardship and safety stewardship, protection of the marine environment, trade facilitation, and so many other issues. So unless we align ourselves to those organizations and the mandates, then we'll be missing the boat. Very quickly, I'll go through what we are doing at Kenya through regional initiatives, starting with the African Union, which has brought about the recognition that as a continent, we can only collectively overcome the challenges and advance further our blue economy through tactical regional alliances, through partnerships, through regional participation. And regional collaboration by African states is now embracing a very strong maritime agenda with a unique vision, mission, and strategies in order to augment the maritime resources in the continent and to enable them yield benefits for individual nations and the continent. And therefore, in this regard, Kenya subscribes to the AU Maritime Transport Charter and Action Plan, which provides for an establishment of an African merchant fleet with regional cabotage, also subscribes to reform and efficiency in port operations and expansion of information systems, modernization and harmonization of maritime laws across the sub-regions, improving security capabilities to counter piracy and armed robbery, and also establish and strengthen national and regional maritime education and training. One of the main outputs of the African Maritime Transport Charter then is the African Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050, which encompasses the development of a common African defense and security policy, common fisheries policy, industrial benefits policy, and most important, an African integrated maritime human resources development strategy, as well as maritime spatial planning. It is within the context of the foregoing that a lot of scope exists for collaboration and cooperation with India in a number of bilateral, multilateral arrangements with not just Kenya, but of course a lot of other African states. We recognize the great strides that India has made in the maritime sector development, particularly in terms of technological developments in areas like hydrography and charting, shipbuilding, research and capacity building. These are areas we've already opened discussions as a country with India for technical support, particularly in capacity building, and we believe that this is the way to go. And in conclusion, so that we manage the marathon race, the development of a blue economy will demand new partnership among stakeholders, both within and across countries, regions, sub-regions, and of course with international agencies and the private sector in order to facilitate greater flow in expertise, in finance, and in capacity needed to effectively close the gaps in the sustainable management of both the natural resources, and this includes the private sector in facilitation of trade and commerce and the free flow of commerce in the global context. Finally, I want to leave us with one thought, which is an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me, and this marks the end of my keynote address. As you have seen, I am in the docket, or in the sector, or rather in the session that's managing the money. And all the money is sitting right there in front of me. So if you allow me, I'll pick my notes and introduce my next speaker.